That's on the call. He told me you guys connected on Coco in East Africa.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. This was just a call to basically it's based on the Sahel and what's going on in Nigeria with I'm basically now a Darfur Women's Action Group representative connected to Sudan. And one thing we learned is that the terrorism is a multinational force from across the Sahel. So the Arab versus Black issue, they're coming from across the Sahel, but they haven't connected to the Sahel Alliance. So we're just putting things together where, you know, Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan are all on the same page as far as security and trying to work with the Sahel Alliance because they're all coming from the same places on the same agendas. They have to work together and not fall for, you know,
But do you know why? Do
divide
you
and
know why they're
conquer.
there? Do you know why they're there? I mean, where in any of these groups do they make guns? None of them make guns.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to look at it not just from the perspective of the players on the ground, but who is behind those players on the ground. And I think that's a common mistake we don't pay attention to. You know, the terrorism that was going on in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is another good example. Where they get the guns from? They don't make guns. They don't make rocket launchers. One of the things I think that is very clear for us to pay attention to is the fact, one simple fact. The United States spends more money in its military budget than any other 10 countries combined. So if
Man.
you took the military budget of China, of Russia, of Great Britain, of France, of Germany, of South Korea,
Mm-hmm.
and any other, you know, Canada, Australia, you name any of those 10 countries, it's less than what the U.S. is paying of our tax dollars into the military budget. And that's one good reason why there is no money there available to keep health care at a low cost, affordable housing,
Mm.
decent schools, decent tuition to go to college.
Mm.
It's because this government outspends any 10 countries combined in just the military. And the question one has to ask is, how is it there is no audit done on the Department of Defense for the last 40 years?
Wow.
That gives them the ability to throw the money in there and use it any kind of way they want to use the money and not be held accountable for it. We spent $2.3 trillion in Afghanistan over 19 years, supposedly training an army.
Afghanistan.
Biden announced that we're going to leave Afghanistan in 2 weeks. In less than 2 days, that army we were supposed to be training disappeared. The Taliban, who we were supposed to be fighting in Afghanistan, became the government in 2 days. This is before the U.S. troops even left Afghanistan.
Oh, man.
We spent $2.3 trillion in that country. So, and not only that, here's the real kicker for us. 90% of the heroin coming in the United States came from Afghanistan at that time. So one has to ask the right questions. What is behind the terrorism? One of the things Burkina Faso clearly made clear is that terrorism was being aided and abetted by the NATO nations, by France, by the United States, as a way to have those countries wanting to depend on having U.S. troops and French troops on their soil. So one thing that we should do here in this country, in my opinion, next year is going to be an election year. Every time any candidate has an open forum, we should be there asking them, are they going to sign on to a pledge that they're going to ask for a full audit of the Department of Defense? Haiti has street gangs with automatic weapons. Haiti don't make guns. They don't even make the bullets. Where are these automatic weapons coming from? When the United States wanted the Contras to overthrow the government in Nicaragua, how did those Contras get the money to buy weapons, and where did the weapons come from? And that's where the whole thing of Iran-Contra came about, because they were bringing cocaine out of Colombia, selling it in our community when they had the so-called crack epidemic, used the money that they got off of the cocaine to then buy weapons, because Congress passed a law saying that the U.S. government could not give weapons directly to the Contras. So our community is paying for this, because our community are the most adversely affected by the cocaine and by the heroin.
Yep.
Which forces so many of our members of our communities not to have decent housing because they're addicted to some type of drug. So we need to be very clear when we start talking about terrorism. You know, terrorism was not in Libya until Obama blew the hell out of Libya to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. And why did they want to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi? Because Muammar Gaddafi was using his oil money to buy gold and use the gold to set up a single currency for the continent of Africa, the same way the Eurodollar is for Europe. And France understood that happened, and that the French franc, the CFA franc, was not going to be used in its former colonies, that in fact France would have been bankrupt, as it's getting ready to become now. So we need to learn how to look below and around the misinformation given to us by the media.
I didn't know that France was only 70 million people, or barely. This is not even a large country compared to some of what we got in Africa. So
no, it's not.
It's
but
amazing.
they made most of its wealth came out of Africa.
Yeah,
they were getting yellow cake uranium out of Niger, and they were paying Niger 86 cents per kilo, and then selling the same kilo of yellow cake uranium for $200. Every 10 kilos of gold coming out of Burkina Faso, Burkina Faso got paid for one of the kilos, and the other 9 went to France for free. We didn't understand why it is the way things are. Why are they terrorists inside of Nigeria? And where do they get their guns from? Where are they getting their grenade launchers from?
All the same places.
That's my point.
I mean, Trump announced. The president announced all the partners that they're going to use to secure Sudan. But to me, it looks like they've always been the partners.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah, they've always been the partners.
I mean, we're never running around talking about Darfur. Do you know what country gave a great deal of the weapons in that conflict?
I heard secretly it was Libya.
No, it was Israel.
Israel. Wow.
Israel. In a Muslim country. Now, why was it? Because of the natural resources in Darfur.
Wow.
When you had the split between Sudan and South Sudan, why was the United States aiding and abetting South Sudan? Because they wanted their oil. That's why they were aiding and abetting them, to split up that country. It's about their resources. And we need to be very, very, very clear on what is behind the violence we find where African people are located, including in this country. Because you'll find in the very cities that have the most so-called violence are the parts of the city that the developers want to get their hands on for cheap money. And all of a sudden, black folks are gone from that part of the city. And all of a sudden, you got all these high rises and very expensive property. In Washington, D.C., in the 50s and 60s, the place you did not want to be in Washington, D.C. was Southwest. Now, some of the most expensive real estate in Washington, D.C. today is in Southwest.
Mm.
And the same thing is getting ready to happen over there in Southeast. You should see the amount of new construction, high-rise buildings, modern buildings on Martin Luther King Avenue.
Mm-mm-mm.
We need to really understand the game they're playing on us. This game of divide and conquer, and most of us getting 95% of our information from what we see on TV.
Mm.
We don't pay the TV to give us the information. So who's paying them? They make their money off of advertisement from Fortune 500 companies. So they have a vested interest, since they're paying for it, to miseducate us on what's going on.
Yep. Well, that's why we had this call, because I'm just going to repeat some of the things we were texting about. The East African Confederation or community, and how it links to Sudan and Ethiopia, and also the Sahel Alliance. We're just trying to cross pollinate, connect the leadership in West Africa, the Sahel Alliance, and East Africa. So we have Brother Opalot, which he told me you guys been working on cocoa, but that's a key platform that we need. And I'm
Well,
going
here's
to,
a question I'm going to ask you. Here's a question I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
How many airlines in Africa
Mm-hmm.
are actually owned by Africans?
Airlines. Well,
Yeah.
boy, I don't have any number. I don't know at all.
2.
So, okay.
Ethiopia and the Egyptians.
Mm.
South African Airlines is in bankruptcy, and Ethiopia right now is operating South African Airlines. Now, stop and think how much it costs to fly from here to Africa. And then think about how many people are flying back and forth all the time, and that money is not going into African Airlines.
Mm-mm-mm.
Right here in the Washington, D.C. area, you have a city-owned university called the University of District of Columbia. That university has a community college. And in that community college, they have a program that within 2 years, they will train you how to become an FAA certified airline mechanic. Now, why is that important? Because if any European, U.S., or Canadian aircraft lands in an African territory and they have a problem with that aircraft, the only people allowed to work on that aircraft is somebody with either an FAA certified license, or a Canadian certified license, or European certified license.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only ones who can do it. So even though they're not even aircraft owned by Africans, they got to use licensed mechanics to work on their aircraft. And every day, you got European and Canadian and U.S. aircraft flying in Africa and out of Africa. Here's one good example of how students right here in the United States could take that 2-year program, which is taught down at National Airport, get certified as an airline mechanic. There's a brother over at BWI, Marshall, Baltimore, Washington International Airport, that would even hire them and let them work with their experienced mechanic, because he has contracts with 12 different airlines. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And get the experience they need. And then when they go back to Africa, they'd be one of the most valued workers on the continent. Because no airlines wants to be in, flying to a location that they don't have a certified mechanic just in case something goes wrong with their aircraft. What does that mean? If something goes wrong with their aircraft, they're now responsible for all the passengers on that aircraft until they can get them to their final destination. So that means that if it takes a day, they got to put them up in a hotel. They got to feed them 3 times a day until the aircraft can fly again. Or they have to turn around and fly a mechanic from Europe to Africa. Well, shucks, that's a 6-hour flight. So here's right here in Washington, D.C., an opportunity for an African American or an African to get themselves a skill that will pay them $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year. But we're not spreading that word around to people. We should be, but we're not.
We're working on it. That's why we're working on it. This is a preliminary call for me to get a the USA expansion. So basically, I have Brother Opalot here. We need to have conferences, not in random places, but very specific places. So, Brother Opalot, in the future, we need to be having conferences in Uganda or Ethiopia and dealing with Sudan.
But we need
Yeah,
conferences right here. We need to educate our folks right here
yeah,
or living
yeah,
right here in this country
yeah.
so that, in fact, because this is a key location right in this country. This
Mhm.
country spends over $1 trillion a year on its military. Now, think about that.
Mhm.
That means then if they're going to spend that much money on its military, they don't have money to keep tuition low. They don't have money for affordable housing. They don't have money for affordable health care. And what community is going to be most adversely affected by those things?
Black community.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so what we have to begin to do is educate our communities right here
Exactly.
on what are the right questions we should be asking any politician running for office. I don't care if they're black, white, or green. And if they come up with the wrong answer, tell them we're not going to vote for them.
Mhm.
You got black folks too often running around, oh, I'm a Democrat. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Now that's another thing with DC and Jackson. Well, Jacksonville, I found out that has we have the connection as Savannah and the Gullah Geechee. We got basically in Gainesville. We have about 500,000 black people. So we have a big population, even bigger than I thought, to teach people. And but DC, I've known for a while, has a congressional delegate, permanent delegate. U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, DC.
But none of them can vote.
Yeah, non-voting delegate, but they could introduce legislation, and speak in the Congress. They could speak at least, but that's something that.
They're limited even in where they can speak. They're limited on what committee they can even be on. And like, why should any of the other ones who can vote
Mhm.
even listen to what they have to say? What do they have to trade for them? They can't tell them, well, if you support me on this issue, I'll support you on that issue. They can't even do that because they can't vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's like someone putting up a facade.
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, y'all don't have to worry about it no more because, hey, y'all got your representative there. What good is a representative who can't vote? What we have to begin to really pay attention to, okay? Because, again, $1 trillion of our tax dollars every year is going into the Department of Defense, and no one can tell you what's happening to the money. That's how they can buy weapons for the terrorists in West Africa, the terrorists in Haiti, the terrorists, in so many different countries that have such an adverse effect on our community. And that's why we have to step back and say, wait a minute. We need to think a little bit smarter. and understand what really will make a difference if we focus. Because see, we don't have a lot of resources, so
Yeah,
we got to be very strategic on how we use our resources.
exactly.
When Cynthia McKinney was a congresswoman in Capitol Hill, one of her biggest things she pushed on was for a full audit in the Department of Defense. And both the Democrats and Republicans went after her because of that.
Of course. The same
They
guy.
changed her voting district 7 times in 14 years
Mm-mm-mm.
to try to prevent her from coming to Congress. So we need to be understanding
Wow.
where we can really be most effective.
And,
Since we don't have a lot of resources, then we need to be very selective on how we use it.
and Cynthia McKinney is a DC, was DC based, right?
Now she came out of Georgia, out there by Atlanta. She
Okay.
was in Fulton County,
Okay.
and they kept changing their political district.
Prevent her
And
from.
then she
Okay.
finally just threw her hands up and said, "The hell with it," and walked away. You know, and it was because we in the African community in this country did not have clear objectives like she did about understanding the power. I mean, think about it. We were in Vietnam. When we were in Vietnam, where did most of the heroin come into this country from? Southeast Asia. When we were in Afghanistan, where did most of the heroin come in this country from? 90%. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. UN reports on illegal drugs in Afghanistan. And look at the years. 90% of the heroin coming in the United States came from Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is a country that doesn't even have a seaport. So that meant they had to fly it out. So how do you get that much heroin? Clearly, poppies, where you make heroin from, is a white flower. And we certainly had U.S. had drones in Afghanistan, which meant you could have spotted the poppy fields miles away. And a drone that had no pilot in the plane. So it meant that the United States wasn't trying to get rid of no poppies. What they were doing was using money out of the black community by selling heroin in the black community to finance the things they wanted to do. We have to learn to do our homework. And we have not been doing our homework.
I see.
Having a bunch of meetings and not looking at things from a substantive way, it's not going to get us to liberation.
Okay. I wanted to. I had two things I've written down. I wanted to ask you because Brother Opalot is here. Thank you. But I'll let him.
Hello, my brother.
I don't know if he's available.
Why is my brother Opalot so quiet?
I don't know. Maybe brother. Okay.
Hola, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear your analysis of the situation. It is war is trade. So when you are explaining who supplies the weapons, it's clear that somebody is receiving a check somewhere or receiving cash somewhere. So our obsession with being annoyed with each other is a big business for some people. So
when you're looking at $1 trillion a year being spent on weapons and military, $1 trillion.
The design work is in progress. People are experimenting on recent innovations in drone technology and others, so they need experimental grounds. And so Islamic ideology is also one of the things that is being used, of course. The Arab world has had the idea of expanding territory in order to create their world. So Sudan has been an extension of Turkey, an extension of Britain, and so that's how Kush was split. The other part of Kush, which is Ethiopia, remain intact, but also has a lot of Arabization. There is one thing there is Islamization and Arabization, but what is happening in Sudan is both. You take a culture and then you want to change identity because you are grandchildren of Arab descent with African, but you also want to change other people who are Africans to be Arabs. So those who don't accept being who understand, of course, accept that they're Arabs, but the Islamist Arab does not want to see the other people who are Africans around. And yet somebody came around and settled in. So that is the problem we're dealing in the Sudan. The idea that you can harass everybody irrespective of who he is.
Yeah, Brother Opalot, we have many. Bro, I had one question real quick before Brother Paul responds, because we have a lot of South Sudanese here in Jacksonville, Florida. One brother told me that many of the people calling themselves Arabs are actually like indigenous people. Maybe even some could be Dinka and stuff like but they're calling themselves Arabs because it's the dominant group, like a gang, you know. Like people could join a street gang, but people are calling themselves Arabs and they're indigenous. Is that do you have a number of people who are doing that?
It's a political ideology that has been pursued by a few scholars that the people who become Muslims also by default becomes Arab. And so, and they enforce it. And it is one of those other reasons as why the war started way back in right from the time of independence. Sudan should have been the first country actually to become independent in Africa. But because its independence was quickly marred by a concept of Arabization, it now positions Ghana to be country number one. But country number one is actually Sudan. Okay. The philosophy pursued by a few scholars, like Aturabi, has been that the people who believe in Islam must also become Arabs.
Yes, I remember under Bashir, I think there was a National Islamic Party or something, a political party. Yeah. I forgot the name.
That's the White House. If you look at before and after photos, the National Islamic Front kind of drab before President Trump gave it a little bit of a makeover. Was convert young people or the Sudanese into Arabs. So even dark-skinned people from Darfur, people whom you would say these are blue-black people, very rich, melanated people, got their minds corrupted because they needed to survive. And therefore, for you to get services to be attended to, you needed to declare yourself, are you an Arab? Or you are
So yeah,
an
the,
African.
the key question,
So
I
that is true.
the key question, because Chad and let's say from Sudan to eastern Nigeria is maybe 3-4 days drive time. It's not hard. So this is what a West Africa Nigeria needs to wake up to. This is the same country, Chad, Sudan, Nigeria. It's not hard to transport terrorism or get from one place to another. So we're coming together. But my question would then to you that people would like to know: out of the 50 million people, Sudanese, how many would you say are indigenous, blue, black? Because we hear these numbers of 2,000 kills. It makes it look like the majority is. It looks like I don't know. We don't know who is the majority. Is it indigenous black people? Out of the 50 million, some reports even say up to 14 million, 28% are Hausa from Nigeria and West Africa that traveled for Hajj to Mecca. Some say up to 28% of Sudan might be Nigerian Hausa. So it's
Uh,
conflicting.
no,
It's
no,
confusing.
it's not really a question of numbers. It's obvious that the dark-skinned people are more than the light-skinned people, if I have to use that word.
Mm-hmm.
And so the issue is there is ideological disorientation that has to be fixed, and that's why because the Sudanese who is saying is an Arab, when he goes to Saudi, he is known as an African because the Arabs know who the Arabs are. So the group that is in Africa lives in a misinformed environment. So they need to understand that they are believers of a particular religion. And believing in a particular religion does not change you to become a person of another race. They should be discussing issues of interest, but not belief structures. The country is big enough for all of them to survive from. It has always been like that. Many civilizations have come and disappeared in that geographical entity called the Sudan. So there can never be anybody's minority or anybody's majority. The people are just Sudanese. The people are, for recent namings, Chadians and others. So the question of using religion and race to perpetuate a business angle of selling weapons is what must be addressed, because the weapons are also for purposes of protecting or extending illegal mining operations. Because the same groups that are running around are controlling mining sections here and there. The same like the situation in the DRC. They chase you from one side and then they go and take over the mining site. And then they go and start mining. So it is not just an ideological way, it's an economic struggle. People are pursuing an economic issue. But they have to paint it as an Islamic thing. They have to paint it as something else. So the African, wherever he is, home and the diaspora, needs to understand that they must cooperate to
to educate each other and to help those who are running away. Because while violence is used, the violence is actually displacing people in order to create room for others to settle and to do mining and to do other economic activities. So it's a displacement mechanism. So that has been the case. When the Janjaweed were doing whatever they were doing, they were displacing. They come and shoot, they come and kill, and they drive. It's exactly what happened to the African from Kush with the arrival of the Arabs. They did the same thing, and that's what drove people, the Great Lakes region. That's why people are in the Congo, people are in Uganda, people are in the southern part. They were in Egypt. But the fellows who came from the Arabian Peninsula have been doing the same thing for a long time. They sit on horses, camels, and drive other groups by violence. And they pursue it as an economic issue. So they will come and pick iron, they will come and make hoes, arrows, and they do the same thing. They come and tell lies, and people kill each other. When they kill each other, one identifies with them, the other does not identify, the other one is pushed away. It has been like that for a long time. So it is high time now, I think, even if we have a lot of numbers, the issue is mental, understanding that an African is an African. An Arab is an Arab. You can believe whatever you believe, but let me be what I am believing. Don't try to make me a British or try to change my identity. So there has been a war of identity which is happening there. It has been an issue of race, there is an issue of religion, and there is also a big issue of resource looting. So a lot of people have been displaced, and there's a lot of pressure in East Africa, a lot of pressure in Sudan, because that war has extended. It is destroying pipelines, it is destroying the refineries, it is destroying, displacing people, and causing a lot of influx of refugees into East Africa. A lot of refugees are in Kenya, a lot of refugees are in Uganda, a lot of refugees are in Ethiopia, and that is also compounding because even Eritrea is not very, very economically endowed. So all those fellows, the fight between Eritrea and Ethiopia has driven people back into East Africa. Uganda is with all types of people. But because they are driven by an ideology, they are taking in everybody. So the intervention on the side of the diaspora and generally the African global community is one, they must be able to address the business of selling weapons. And this is not an African issue. It is a European issue, it's an American issue. So it must be addressed in America. The Congress, the parliaments have to be confronted that the companies that they have licensed have diverted their investments to Africa, and they are financing this kind of insurgencies. The corporations are making money while people are dying. Then those who are running must also be assisted, because countries like Uganda, Kenya, generally East African community is getting too overstretched. People are sleeping not at home. So there has to be interventions also in that. So the diaspora, Africa, needs to intervene also in humanitarian issues. Yeah. Then I think the other issue is continuing the dialogue of educating our people to understand that you don't become an Arab merely by believing in Islam. You don't become a Hebrew by believing in Judaism. faith is different from race. So that requires a massive education, massive mental orientation, because the people who carry the Quran think that by carrying the Quran, they become also Arabs. That is what has been planted in the minds of other people that have been conquered. So the African who has in his head that is an Arab looks at the other African who is not accepting the idea that is an Arab as an enemy. And then that becomes the basis for his killing his own brother. That is why the people who are killing each other, they think they are different from the ones who are being killed. They are the same people. But one has a different software from the other one who is a victim. So he considers the other just as a biological volume that must be dismantled, that must be eliminated. So transforming race identity as a basis for eliminating his own brother. That whole process of reorganization of our people needs to be embarked upon. And that requires a lot of meetings.
Yeah,
So that's where we are.
this has to. I don't want to put too much on your plate, but you know the Ateker kingdom is connected to. We covered it: East African community, Ethiopia, and Sudan. So that's 510 million people that I'm counting. Ethiopia 130,
Yeah,
Sudan
these are
50.
the same people.
Yeah, 500 million people. So this is a platform that I called multiple people that keep messaging me, but sometimes I think it's more like they're trying to compete, or they're trying to compete for attention. So I said, everybody who's serious, gather here, or message me, or start reporting to you, because you've thrown festivals and conferences that cover multiple countries and federations. So if the people want an international platform, I said, don't send me the messages anymore. But sometimes it's people are competing over here in the diaspora for attention, or they have their own agendas, even if they say they're Pan-African sometimes. So I see it. Brother Paul answered, so that's a good thing. Like we could have if people want to be registered in Africa as an entity, or be in these government conferences, you have to show some sort of capacity to conduct yourself professionally, and be in attendance when you're or schedule calls and report to people. It's Africa. It's a different country, so different countries it's volunteer. Nobody's going to call on you, or nobody could force you to come. So that's consistency. Consistent calls like this is a priority. We have the numbers. There's no reason for us to separate again. That's my point. But one thing I think I wanted to mention, or two things. I'm going. This is just an initial call. I'm going to talk to people in the USA from specific cities about educating our people in big groups, like Brother en masse, as Brother Paul said. There needs to be USA education on what's going on as far as the weapons and who's buying it in the Department of War and all those things. So this is just an initial call to see who in the USA can start checking into Africa and to the East Africa. But there's another issue, Brother Opalot. I know we can do USA conferences, and you guys know the technical issues of doing all that travel. But another issue is Latin America. I don't know, Brother Opalot. Have you seen what's going on with Venezuela? Are you there?
Yeah, I am here. I have not been very much following the developments in Latin America.
Okay.
But one thing I appreciate is that they are also going through almost similar challenges that most of the African governments or countries are going through. Poverty is a clear mark that is seen among the people there. and having challenges of governance and
NATO.
and
Well. This is the update I have to provide. NATO, USA is sending their biggest warships to down there to Venezuela, to a country of 30 million people. They're saying they're going to invade or remove the president, regime change, over saying he leads a drug cartel and that they want to remove him. But so he went to Burkina Faso he went to Russia and he made deals with Russia, I think Turkey, Iran. He met Ibrahim Traore, and they said they're going to open an embassy based on the Burkina Faso revolution and Zimbabwe revolutions. So they're opening embassies in Africa. The population, I think, is minority, has African blood. So it's a mixed race country, and I know the USA would like to install people that don't have that separate Africa and Venezuela and Latin America. But here's the key point. You know how we say you represent 500 million people because of the federations Ateker is in? Venezuela is, you could probably count 100 million people. Even though the country is 30 million, they have some allies. So it's 100 million people block. So if we could get a couple, maybe 2 or 3 more countries connected to Venezuela, we can have a large voice in Latin America. So the issue here is the Caribbean and the USA. They don't the Caribbean people and Latin American people, they overlap, but they don't cooperate a lot. So I know you've had conferences in Jamaica, I think Guyana, but those places, even Guyana is fighting Venezuela, and they're letting Haiti get invaded, and so it's very disorganized when it comes to the Caribbean. And then the Caribbean associations in America, they don't work. They don't address these kind of things. It's very disorganized. So the ideology and the education, we have to be precise on what we're doing. So I'm looking at Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia. They're all tied to Haiti. So Haiti speaks Spanish. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of Haitians speak Spanish. So whether we can get them or not, that's 4 countries that are 100 million people in total. Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, they're neighbors or they're connected historically. So 100 million people in that Latin American bloc. But as we said, the U.S. government is deploying warships and they're trying to go to war. So, that's 100 million people that we would have in 4 countries combined. So, and possible military in Haiti. They've had a world-class military a couple centuries ago, and they're fighters. So that's Latin America and the Caribbean, 100 million people. If we could get those Haiti involved, but USA, I'm going to have more calls, and we're going to connect them more to East Africa going forward. But this was a preliminary call. Most of the people have been messaging me, and it's more about me transferring, them to East Africa to see if they want to work together. But so far, I think some people are just faking it. I think they want to do their own thing. So I'm going to call multiple people in the USA after this going forward. But this is just reestablishing contact. I know, brother.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know,
Thank
brother.
you so much for this call.
Yeah, brother Pumphrey.
Thank you so much for this call, because I have been in touch with the brother Paul Pumphrey on the perennial cash crop campaign, especially on cocoa and coffee. I have had him engaged with a number of our platforms because we think that if we are dealing with an economic problem, then you might as well try to fix it using economics. So we are busy mobilizing schools across East Africa to establish demo gardens or gardens for growing cocoa and coffee, so that we can do value addition and be able to trade internationally in these commodities, so that the proceeds of these commodities help our people to defeat poverty and also to connect the diaspora with the countries of the young people of Africa at home. And then that establishes a relationship, because talking about Africa at home and Africa in the diaspora without a common activity, without an element of organization, a shared task, it becomes very difficult. So Paul has been very instrumental in driving the idea that Africa, using the large portion of its arable land, should concentrate on producing cash crops and add value and move it to their own people across the diaspora, who also further add value, and therefore they can be able to share the proceeds for collective development in the diaspora and at home. So if they are like-minded people who want to partner, the Ateker Kingdom Alliance is willing to collaborate with such people in that kind of trade and cultural exchanges. So we've got some people who have gotten involved. Reverend Jonathan Weaver, who has a big school in the DRC Congo with over 1,000 students, the Weaver International School, is helping the cross-border refugees that are crossing from DRC, crossing to Uganda. And this project, or this initiative of Cocoa Kids Africa, is also consolidating some of this progress, so that these many refugees that are crossing the border, flooding schools here and there, don't find themselves idle and struggling to get a garden of cocoa. Can be around 500 cocoa plants, and you can harvest around $5,000 per annum. But if you add value, you might as well go to around $10,000 or more if you add value to that output of cocoa, which is now chocolate, cocoa butter, wine, and other related products of the cocoa or coffee. So we think that that is one way we can create wealth, and with that wealth, our people can once again be organized.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Because, well, I wanted to also add, because, there's been a lot of, Pan-Africanism in West Africa. A lot of times it's been frozen for years because of more ethnic, a tribe in West, some countries would just work with the diaspora, but they wouldn't work for unity. It would just be private deals. But at this stage, because of the Sahel Alliance breaking away from the rest of West Africa and the corruption, we have the Sahel Alliance and 70 million people. We have East African Community, 330 million people. That's 400 people right there. Then you have Ethiopia and the African Union that can be swayed into being in the conversation. So Ethiopia, East African Community, and Sahel Alliance, that's the total is maybe 530 people.
I think you're doing the math the wrong way.
How am I doing it?
You're talking about what the potential is when you talk about those numbers.
No, wait.
But you don't.
Just let me finish the sentence. I'm going to say, like, as far as having, like, telecommunications, like we filing reports to the governments, or having, once we get people in the USA to engage, which I've been talking to people, but the issue is, I've been talking to people about engaging, but the issue is some people have their own agendas, and that's just being realistic. Like, if we have a call, or if I send a contact like Opalot to a group in the USA that's been contacting me, they may or may not take up on the contact. They might have their own agenda as why they're contacting me. Maybe it's to distract me or something like that. That's just being realistic. But if there's a consistent engagement from the USA, a group of people that are Pan-African or Garveyites, and they want to educate people and work together. This can work through Brother Opalot. He has amazing government contacts through his community. So it's
Okay,
more
if
about
I may,
being serious. Okay.
say, point one, when you talk about Venezuela, I've been to Venezuela twice. I have a number of contacts on the ground inside of Venezuela. In fact, I'm looking at the possibility of going there next month. The thing that is clear to me, the reason why the United States is going after Venezuela is because Venezuela has a tremendous potential given the amount of oil it has. And the United States wants to rob Venezuela like they're robbing everybody else around the world. Of course, the value which Venezuela have is much greater than in the Middle East. Venezuela has more oil than any other country in the world. At the same time, guess what other country has a lot of oil? Haiti. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can even ask Alexa about Haiti. She'll tell you the same thing. That Haiti has huge deposits of oil as well as natural gas. There's a real reason why the United States focuses attention on Haiti. In 2008, United States built its fourth largest embassy in the world in Haiti. Now, if Haiti is poor, why in the world do you think they want to build some large embassy there? Haiti only has a little over 10 million people. So why would they build an embassy bigger in Haiti than the one they have in Canada, bigger than the one they have in London, bigger than the one they have in Berlin, bigger than the one they have in Paris? Unless Haiti has a tremendous amount of value. Donald Trump is only interested in money. This is why they run around talking about Haiti all the time. This is why they're talking about Venezuela. This is why, France is so concerned about Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Mali has oil and gold. Niger has uranium and oil. And Burkina Faso has gold. It's all about greed. And we need to be very clear about that because we got black folks who are willing to sell their soul around greed. They're not looking at the issues because they're concerned about black people. The president of Rwanda today grew up in Uganda. Paul Kagame grew up in Uganda, was recruited by the US CIA, brought to the United States, in the late 80s, and trained at Fort Leavenworth out there in Kansas. And then brought to Rwanda. Was he born in Rwanda? Yes, he was. But his family left Rwanda and moved to Uganda in the 50s. United States brought him over here, trained him to be the head of the government of Rwanda. Why? Because they wanted the government of Uganda and the government of Rwanda to annex where the coltan was located and the cobalt was located inside of the Congo, which is on the eastern part of the Congo, next to the borders of Uganda and Rwanda. I've been fortunate that I've been in places where I saw things happening and figured it out before it even happened. In 1995, I helped organize a delegation of African Americans to go down to Haiti. And when we get there, there's U.S. troops there, French troops there, and Canadian troops there, and they kept stopping our vehicles. So the members of the delegation, we want to meet with the U.S. ambassador. I'm like, oh boy. So we set up the meeting. We went to the U.S. Embassy. They put us up in a conference room with a long conference table. The delegates sat on both sides of the table. I sat at the far end. The ambassador came and sat at the near end. And I'm going to give you his name because I want you to look it up. His name was William Swing, like a swing on a tree. As I'm watching him answer the questions to the members of the delegation, it became clear to me this guy was CIA. So I put my hand up. He called on me. I said, Mr. Ambassador, what's your history in the State Department? This man was in Congo, Bosnia, right before a military coup. Then he went to Liberia, and while he was in Liberia, there was a military coup. Then he went to South Africa, and when he went to South Africa, right before Nelson Mandela came out of jail. I mean, right after he got out of jail, before he became president. And what does he do in South Africa? He has the white regime spend all the money in the national budget. Now, why was that? Because they wanted Mandela to come to office with not enough money to pay the military, which was the white military of South Africa, which would have been a bloodbath. So now Mandela has to negotiate with international banks, okay, as well as the IMF to get money to make payroll. Well, he did his job there, so now he leaves there, he goes to Nigeria. What goes on in Nigeria? A military coup. He leaves Nigeria to go to Haiti when they're taking Aristide, who they had tried a coup on him in 91. He was in the United States up until 1994, and they took him back to Haiti, and this same guy becomes now the ambassador in Haiti. So after that meeting, I was clear this guy was CIA. I'm back in Haiti in 1998. I asked one of my Haitian friends, what is this guy up to? Oh, he's not here anymore. Where is he? Oh, he's in the Congo. What's going on in the Congo? Ugandan and Rwandan troops in the central part of the Congo to kill Kabila, Laurent Kabila, who they had just put into power the year before after they pushed Mobutu out of power. And Laurent Kabila called Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Angola. Zimbabwe sent its air force, Namibia sent its troops, and Angola sent their troops, and they defeat the troops of Uganda and Rwanda. And the thing is that back in the 70s, I was a co-founder of the Anti-Apartheid Movement USA. I knew the UN representatives of the liberation movements from Southern Africa because they and I used to go around college campuses and in the community, educating the Black community about what was happening in Southern Africa under apartheid. And their representative from Namibia, from SWAPO, was a brother by the name of Theo Ben-Garab. He and I had spoken in many colleges in this country, educating people in the late 70s about apartheid. That's what set the basis for the groundswell in the early 80s around apartheid in this country. Okay. He told me himself that when his troops went into to the Congo, he went with the troops. And after the troops defeated Uganda and Rwanda in the central part of the Congo, they had a big problem. The problem was, when you defeat a foreign troop in a foreign land, you're responsible for those troops until the troops go home. And central Congo to the eastern part of Congo, there are no roads. So now the question is, how do you get troops that are in the central part of Congo back to the eastern part of Congo so they get them home? And he said, while he and the foreign minister of Zimbabwe were meeting, they get a phone call from Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State under Clinton. And why is she calling them? She's calling them to offer air transportation to take the troops from Uganda and Rwanda back home, which meant that they were the ones who brought them there in the first damn place. So yes, I'm clear about what the heck is going on, what the United States is doing with the U.S. tax dollars, that the typical person in the United States don't even try to find out how the United States is using that tax dollars with the military. And he told me that was one of the worst decisions he ever made when he agreed to allow the United States to take those troops back home. Because what the United States wanted were the minerals next to the border of Uganda and Rwanda, where the coltan and the cobalt was. And so when they took them back home, then all they did was come back across the border and start pushing people off the land, killing people, raping women, and taking the coltan and the cobalt back into their countries so they could sell it on the international market. You know, I often listen to people talk about the diaspora. They talk about Central Africa. They talk about Southern Africa. They talk about West Africa. They talk about South America, like Venezuela. They talk about the Caribbean, like Haiti. These are places I've actually been to. I have a very close working relationship with the grassroots movements on the ground in Haiti. Like I said earlier, I've been to Haiti 25 times. You know, what we have to understand is that what the NATO nations want to do is to stay on top. And the reason why they have been on top economically in the world today is because they've been in a position to rob Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and Asia. And right now, they're losing that ability because countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, when you look over there at Botswana and Namibia, they're taking a stance where they're saying, no more, we're going to allow you to take our minerals out of our country. Raw. You want our minerals? Then we're going to have to process our minerals inside of our country and we'll sell you the added value of it. We're not going to give you our cocoa because we'll process the cocoa and make it into chocolate. Then we'll sell you the chocolate. And this is what Europe, the NATO nations have done. They've used Africa to produce the raw materials, and they pay very little money for those raw materials. And then they process it, and they jack up the prices and sell it to the world. And their greed blind them to understand they thought they could get away with doing the same thing in China. But China had their own agenda. And what China said was, okay, you want to set factories up to take advantage of the cheap labor we have here? No problem. But every year your factories in our country, 1/10 of the ownership becomes ours. So at the end of 10 years, we own the factory. We'll still make your product, but now it's our factory. So now you only need us to do 2 shifts to make what you want? Fine. We'll put a 3rd shift in to make what we want. And that's how China did it. That's how China slowly but surely started creeping up their economy to the point now they have surpassed the U.S. economy. But we need to be smart enough to understand how we need to do the same thing ourselves. We need to be in a position where we make our own chocolate, where we roast and blend our own coffee, where we refine our minerals, where we cut our own diamonds. That's what Botswana is doing now. Botswana says no raw diamonds come out of our country anymore. They were taking diamonds from Botswana over to India and let the Indians cut the diamonds, and then they had the profit to sell the diamonds all over the world. Botswana said, no, we're not doing that no more. We know how to cut our own diamonds. We'll cut our own diamonds. And no more raw diamonds will leave our country again. Burkina Faso told France that during their rainy season, they produced over twice as much tomatoes than they could consume. But by the time the dry season came in, those tomatoes were rotten. So what did Burkina Faso do? They built a tomato paste plant. So they wouldn't have to send the tomatoes to France anymore. They kept them at home. And they put it in tomato paste where they could store it. And now they have all the tomatoes they need during the dry season as well as the rainy season. Burkina Faso looked at the fact that they had very few roads, paved roads in Burkina Faso. And during the rainy season, when the crops were growing, the roads got so muddy, their trucks stuck. And they couldn't get the food to the market. So now they got a whole program of building anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 kilometers a year. So that if the farmers then have their crops, they can get their crops to the processing plant. So these are things that we need to understand and study, to understand the real answers. When we look at South Sudan, all you have to do is pay attention to the heads of state in South Sudan and look at what hat he's wearing. Because he was courted by the oil industry in Texas. That's why he walks around with a cowboy hat. And they put him in power to guarantee that the oil in South Sudan will go to the U.S. oil companies. And then there was a split between his movement and the other movement that fought against the government of Sudan to separate from Sudan. And so even though they fought and lost all their lives and suffered through that war, they're still fighting now because they're fighting over greed rather than over freedom and liberation. So there's a lot for us to learn. And I've been fortunate enough to have been in many parts of this world. I mean, I've been all over West Africa. I've been to Senegal, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Conakry. In fact, the last time I was in Guinea-Conakry, unbeknown to me, when that plane landed on the tarmac, I found out I was made a guest to the state of Guinea. What does that mean? When I came down the stairs of the plane, I'm getting ready to go walk to the bus to get on the bus with everybody else to go to the terminal. They go, ho, ho, ho. You don't go to the bus. There's a van for you and your partner. And in one van, they carried just two of us to the terminal. When we got to the terminal, there was a sister waiting for us to take us through immigration and customs where we didn't have to wait in line. You know, so I'm not telling you stuff I've read, just things that I've read. I'm telling you about experiences that I've actually lived. The first time I was in Cuba was in 1971 because this country put a contract to have me killed. I have a brother who's lived in exile since 1971. So, you know, for a lot of people, this is new and this is a game. It's not a game. This is real. I mean, if I wanted to, I could call right now and put somebody on the phone who works in the foreign ministry of Venezuela. I know a number of people who work in the foreign ministry of Venezuela. I know a number of comrades on the ground. I know people in the city council of Caracas. I got brothers and sisters, and I mean African Venezuelans who live about 3-hour drive, 2 or 3 hour drive away from Caracas, who are working with cocoa in Venezuela. You know, so what we have to understand, and I'm not saying stuff because I'm trying to brag, because I'm not. What I want to say is this, though. We need to understand what this game is all about. The game is about the fact of greed and domination done, pushed by the NATO nations and the United States. And they're seeing that their control over Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, and Asia is coming to an end. And they're in panic mode right now. And they're like any other animal. When they're in panic mode, that's when they're most dangerous. So we need to be clear. This is not a game. This is a struggle that we must win if we're going to stay alive. Because United States, Europe, they got nuclear weapons. And they can destroy this whole world that we live in. So we really have to talk about how do we educate the people in our country to understand the issue is not about how rich we can become, but how we can take the resources that are located in our communities and maximize the benefits from those resources to benefit our community. And if we do that with cocoa, if we do that with coffee, if we do that with coltan and cobalt and tin and copper and all these other resources that are in the ground or on top of the ground where African people live, we could truly change the status in which we live in under today. Because people of African descent are living in some of the poorest conditions in the world, even though they're living in some of the richest regions of the world. And that's really where the game is of what we need to talk about, how we're going to deal with. That's what we need to focus on. How do we? And this is what's happening in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, rather than just selling their gold, they're refining their gold. Because when they refine their gold, they increase the value of their gold by at least 7 times. And so that added value doesn't go to France anymore. It stays in Africa. It stays in Burkina Faso. It stays in Niger. It stays in Mali. And that's why United States and France are so angry about what's going on in the Sahel. And the rest of Africa is beginning to wake up and see the benefits that are happening for the people in those 3 countries. And they're saying, hey, we want that same thing to happen to us. This is why, as far away from Burkina Faso as Kenya is, they have decals on their taxis with a picture of Touré. Because they're saying Kenya should be doing the same thing. And I agree with them, they should be. But that's what we need to do, is learn from the people who have been successful in changing the situation in which their people have been left to work under. That's why I brought up the point about a simple thing is learning how to become an airline mechanic. Because in the United States, over the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be a shortage of 30,000 airline mechanics. And if we got jobs that can pay us $70,000 to $100,000 a year, guess what? That's resources we can put back in our community. It also means that we could be in a position where we could even have our own airlines in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Central America. Watch how the United States operate. In the 1970s, Haiti had its own airlines, Jamaica had its own airlines, the Dominican Republic had its own airlines. Today, there is no airlines in Jamaica. There is no airlines in Haiti. Why? Because they didn't want that wealth coming back to Haiti or Dominican Republic or to Jamaica. And so they corrupt the system where they forced them to give up their airlines. Why was that? Because they knew in those years is when people really start wanting to go to the Caribbean for their vacations. And they had, wow, all this money that can be made of flying back and forth into Jamaica, flying back and forth in the Dominican Republic. Oh, no, no, no. That money needs to come to the white corporate companies. And they started fighting over the fact and made it sure that they destroyed the economy of Jamaica. And after destroying the economy of Jamaica, they told Jamaica they have to sell their own airlines before they could borrow any money. And once they did that, then they started dumping U.S. food into Jamaica, forcing the farmers in the countryside to go bankrupt. They shipped powdered surplus milk from the United States to Jamaica that was subsidized 137%. There's an interesting documentary on Jamaica called Life and Debt, DEBT, Life and Debt. That's a video that you all should get and study. And you'll see what the United States did to destroy the economy of Jamaica. And they did the same thing to destroy the economy of Haiti and Puerto Rico. Because we need to understand that we need to reverse what they did if we want African people to rise. That's all I want to say. I'm just saying, there are things we need to study and understand very clearly as to why we're in the situation we're in, not just inside the U.S., but around the whole world. And look at the examples of the countries that are now reversing that process and now acquiring the wealth that they need to develop and address the needs of the people of their country. But again, they run around talking about terrorists as if terrorists make guns. They don't make guns. Them guns are coming from Europe, coming from the United States. So you have to ask the question, how is it that the United States is supplying guns to terrorism at the same time they run around talking about how they oppose terrorism? How is it that the United States militarily was in Afghanistan for over 19 years, and yet Afghanistan was producing 90% of the heroin coming into the United States? The only answer one can say is that the United States had to been knowingly aware of the heroin coming to the United States, and they did nothing to stop it. But these are things that we need to pay attention to, of how they undermine the wealth in our countries, and then figure out what we need to do to reverse that. They manipulated the elections in Jamaica to get rid of Michael Manley, to bring in Edward Seaga. Now, who was Edward Seaga? Both parents of Edward Seaga was from Syria. Edward Seaga himself was born in Boston, Massachusetts. And he becomes the prime minister to replace Michael Manley in Jamaica? How did that happen? When Michael Manley was prime minister of Jamaica, they had a law that said no company in Jamaica could operate unless 51% of the ownership was owned by Jamaicans. First thing Edward Seaga did when he comes to office, get rid of that law. Get rid of their airlines. Allow U.S. tourist companies come in and buy our beachfronts all along the coast. Montego Bay, Ultra Reels, Negril. And then they came up with a commercial, come back to Jamaica. Why are they saying come back to Jamaica unless they were telling you not to go to Jamaica to cause Jamaica to be in economic straits so they could take over the country? Well, these are just things I think we should think about, and then map out a strategy of how we can play a role in bringing about that change. Because trust me, countries in Africa will need licensed mechanics to run their aircraft, to be there to work the airports. I mean, they're going to need a lot of trained people, but that was one of them that is low-hanging fruit, given that they're teaching it right here at University of District of Columbia. At any rate, just something to think about. And my brothers, I might have to cut loose this call, but thanks for calling me. And you all have my number. Feel free. If you need to talk specifics about projects or how we can make this thing move forward, because definitely we have to move forward. I'm sick and tired of us being in the position we are in this world today. Peace be with you. Take care.